Welcome back to TYT Sports, our Thursday rundown show, which means two things. Jason, I'm already considering where to get salt on the rim of my margarita after we finish this show, and also that we have three fantastic stories to cover, one of which, salt on the rim.
You care more about your margaritas than you do about the stories.
Well, we'll move forward anyway, because the first story we are talking about is focused around the UFC. So as we know, in the run-up to McGregor versus Diaz, which turned out to be just one of the most tantalizing fights I think I have ever seen in my life. One of the reasons that was the case, Jason, was because, as I mentioned, in the lead up to it, there was some back and forth. And that back and forth happened to be open-ish bottles of water splashed around. God, everyone in the press conference all wet. It was undescribable. But either way, action may be taken. According to this quote I'm going to throw to from Ryan Hartness, first of all, providing some context, they could be up for fines and actually suspension. So this is a higher up in Nevada system telling the NSAC to throw the book at these two fighters. In another similar incident from Nevada, John Jones and Daniel Cormier got into a brawl that spilled out into the crowd. Suspensions could also be thrown at both fighters and in any of Nate's posse that participated, including Jake Shields, who is set to headline a World Series fighting event in November.
So John Jones and Cormier got 10% of their purse taken away. They did not face suspension. They did have to do community service. I think this is going to be a similar instance. The fact of the matter is they can face suspension. That would be absurd.
Yeah.
And we're talking about press conference meltdowns and which you, I mean, and you have a compelling argument as to why you think it may have been partially staged.
Yeah.
Which I don't disagree with. I think it's equally up there with many other. When you watch it back over and over again, it still looks a little bit fake. I know, it's just an opinion. It's not anything facts. We're just kind of commentating on that specific aspect of it. Regardless, 10% of $3 million and $2 million is not a small chunk of change.
It is
Actually,
not.
I'll take 10% of that money any day of the week if that was
No
a
doubt.
possibility. It would be $300,000 and $200,000 respectively because I can do math.
That was quick math. That's quick
Go to
math.
my calculator earlier today. By the way, all those teachers who said you wouldn't have a calculator on you at all times when you were growing up, hence why you had to learn to do your times tables. That's right.
Say hi to iOS teachers.
Right.
So I think that to go back to the point that I thought it was staged, again, there's no validity to it. The only thing that I've seen is that Nate Diaz isn't a good actor, and it seemed like he had a clear cue where it was like, oh, I should leave. All right, fuck this. I'm out. And screw you guys. But this would be a way to kind of validate in the opposite direction. Like, well, why would we stage it if they were going to get fined? Well, because you pulled in probably the highest amount of money that you have done in recent terms for a fight.
It was the most that Nate Diaz got paid. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it makes sense that you could probably add that into it. But either way, I'm not going to sit and go back and forth on that. The only thing I'm going to discuss is it just proves that no one is kind of is separate from the rule. Like, if you're going to break the rules, yeah, it's going to add to the anticipation for the card. I myself, at that moment in time when I seen it from a distance, I was like, Jesus, they're going at it. They don't like each other. McGregor was showing he could potentially be heading to the MLB if this fight didn't work out by launching water bottles from the distance.
Join Tim Tebow in
yeah.
the New York Mets.
I mean, anything's up for grabs. But again, it's further than that. It's that Dana White, at any point, which we criticize him for at times, but again, I don't think it's worthy of the criticism, showcases that no one's bigger. That even if it is a small thing like this where it seemed innocent and it kind of added to the situation, it still has to be addressed. The rule's still there that Dana White likes to ensure that everyone follows, no matter how big or how much of a superstar you are. But
that's why
talking
I like
to Dana
Harkness's quote from Up Rocks about them literally throwing the book at them. That's
yeah.
what they're doing. They're throwing the book at them, at least that phrase. But it doesn't end there because Dana White, we've had this conversation multiple times on TYT Sports, and we've had this conversation multiple times on TYT Sports. It has to do with should the fighters have the power or should Dana White hold the power, and what is that dynamic like? For certain things, I believe Dana White is correct in terms of promotion, his rules about why you need to promote, and if you follow those, that's fine. I don't take anything away from Dana White on that specific aspect, but we've also said, and I've stated multiple times, that I take everything that any commissioner will do on a case-by-case basis, because some things you're going to agree with and some things you're not. In this case, I heavily disagree with Dana White's quotes about Conor McGregor fighting at 170. Returning to welterweight isn't one of them, according to UFC President Dana White, who spoke during an interview as transcribed by MMA Weekly. I made that fight twice. That's it. It's time to move on because McGregor has the 145-pound title. He continues to say, at the end of the day, he's a 145-pound fighter. He can go to lightweight, but going back up to 170 makes absolutely no sense, and it clogs up the entire division, which isn't fair to the rest of the crew. Now, while he makes a good point in it, the fairness in the division and it clogging it up and him saying he's a 145-pound fighter, that is not up for Dana White to decide. If you're an MMA fighter, if you're a UFC fighter, it is up to you to decide where you want to fight and whether Dana White feels like he's looking out for McGregor's best interests. I find it hard to believe that Dana White is looking out for any of his fighters outside how much money they can possibly make him. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's a Gordon Gekko style of making money. Just business, lunches for pussies. Like, that's how this works.
If there's one thing that Dana White wants more so than one major superstar, is he wants 2 or 3 or 4. So if you put one major superstar into a division that is already oversaturated, I see it from a business mind frame what he's thinking here.
Yeah.
I have actually a point to agree with Dana White, but it's not for the reasons that he is promoting. He doesn't want McGregor to go up to 170 because he thinks it's oversaturated. I don't think McGregor should fight at 170 because he unconvincingly won at 170. Like, he did perform well. So I know you agree with that. I'm not saying...
But what I don't agree with is it's not up to Dana White to decide.
In an ideal world, commissioners act as traffic control. They basically guide the traffic in the right direction, make sure that everyone goes to where they're supposed to go and no one gets hurt and everyone's safe at the end of the day. That's not the way it works in certain other fighting sports. Promoters, as I mentioned before, control the majority of the boxing world, and therefore you don't get any sort of fights that you really want to see. I mean, GGG and Kell Brook, that's one of the first times in recent terms I can imagine 2 fighters of a larger status, one of which moving up to reach that fight and get the possibility. Most of the time, promoters will be in their ear saying, "No, we'll make more money if you win and stay at your own, like, screw your own ambition. You just stay here and we'll be fine." So Dana White, I think, more often than not, gives fighters flexibility to pursue what they want to do when he can make money from it. He's already made his money from Conor McGregor jumping up.
Boxing needs a Dana White, is the point I'm going to make, because I think Dana White has made enough right decisions, obviously, to get to the point where he is today. When you mentioned boxing, though, he said that the majority is made by promoters, making it believe that there's a minority controlled by something else. There ain't. It's entirely controlled by promoters.
Very true. And that's... And whether or not I agree with everything Dana White says, I'm always in the back of my mind just thinking, but again, I went through boxing and I don't get the fights that I really want to see.
I think that's why we fairly look at this as a case-by-case basis. Overall, the overarching theme of Dana White, I like Dana White. I think he's great for the UFC. Do I think he's right in the case of telling McGregor where he should be fighting? Not necessarily. The funny thing is Dana White's right in that he shouldn't be fighting at 170. It's just not up to Dana White.
But could you argue the case that you should listen to Dana White because he's guided him in the right direction so far?
That doesn't seem like McGregor's style.
I don't think it does, but it's like, could it be Dana White? If someone questioned Dana White, could he just simply go, point to a situation where my decisions and my guidance and my advice directed someone in the wrong way?
I think Dana White should have to fight at 170. And then decide if McGregor gets to fight.
And then he decides whether or not he goes that way. I just think that I think he's trying to make sure that he continues to promote superstars and he continues to get the big money cards in every single division because he just made a good pocket from a welterweight kind of division fight. So he wants to make more money going back down. He wants to make sure that Aldo, I think, gets a chance to kind of redeem himself.
His pockets are lined with silk.
Absolutely,
they're lined with silk. My pockets are lined with
He has pocket squares in his pockets. His actual pockets.
Is that been
Paul
done
just
before?
pulls out napkins.
Has that ever been done?
That probably has been done. I think that's where they came from.
I'm going to start a new trend.
Right. Pocket square in the corners.
Corner pockets. We already have a name. Come follow my business.
I don't think it's going to sell.
At Corner Pockets. I'm going to make it. Definitely take it.
I don't think it's going to sell.
At Corner_Pockets.